Welcome, everyone, to our 35th Salon of the Maternal Gift Economy Breaking Through series, hosted by Genevieve, Vaughan, and the International Feminists for the Gift Economy. I'm Letecia, Layson. I'm returning again as your moderator after our long summer vacation. We're happy to have Cassie Thornton, Lori Amy, and Vasallo with us today. Each of our presenters will speak for about 15 or 20 minutes, which will give us ample time for questions and discussion at the end. Check your screen for the Q&A icon. Please enter your questions there. Our guests will answer all your questions after the presentations. The chat box is going to remain open during the session for your comments. Today's session is being recorded and will be available for viewing on our website, maternalgifteconomymovement.org. So let's begin. Our first speaker is Lori Amy, who is joining us from Albania. Welcome, Lori. Lori is a professor in the Department of Writing and Linguistics at Georgia Southern University, where she researches and writes about the ways that violence writes our identities. Most importantly, Lori is interested in memory as a work and activity that can bring the past into the present in ways that help us imagine new possibilities for the futures we are in the process of making. Lori explores the intersection of narrative and traumatic memory and identity through the theoretical frameworks of feminist psychoanalytic theory and cultural studies. Focusing on trauma as a social affair, her research is interested in the relationship between the individual and society, between personal identity, experience, and memory, and public institutions, ideology, and narratives. You can find a much longer bio at our website. Welcome, Lori, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Diane, I'm going to ask you to start sharing the images that I sent to you. And I'm going to start off my talk today by grounding you in where I am in Albania and why I'm here. So I have literally just come down, like just as in yesterday, from the Northern Albanian Alps. And the image you're looking at right now is of Theth. Next image, Diane. This is my room in the mountains in Theth, and that's my chicken. Not my chicken, but the chicken that visited me. And the next photo shows you, again, some more mountains. The next one, I don't know why I gave you two mountains. So the next photo, Diane. This is, and we'll just keep this one up here. This will be the last photo, and we'll just leave this one up here. This is where I was. I was at Kola e Sadre Lucas, and this was a Venetian dwelling built in 1735. So why am I starting with this? The reason I went there is because I am writing about this family who has for centuries been living in the Northern Albanian Alps in my book. And before I talk to you about how the pyramid schemes devastated Albania, I want to ground you in Albanian resilience. Now, the members of this family were heavily persecuted under the communist regime, and very few people understand the extent of violent persecution under the communist dictatorship. The entire family, the ones that weren't executed, spent their lives in internment and prison labor camps. John, the man who I was visiting here, was born in internment in Albania. His mother did things like search the dung of all of the animals that she passed, filtering through it for kernels of undigested corn anything that she might retrieve in order to be able, with the meager resources available to her, to somehow turn that into nutrition for her children. And this is how they survived. Now, when the regime changed hands in 1991, 1/5 of the Albanian population was interned, living in exile or in prisons. And they all, like John, made their way by foot back to whatever they remembered as home. And for many of them, like John, there was only an idea of a home that he had heard about from his mother because he was born in the camps. So why do I start us with that? I start us with that because I'm going to talk about how the pyramid schemes collapse the economy. But one of the ways that the humans in Albania survived is through the gift, and quite literally the gift of life. So let me tell you about John's wife, Maria. I was walking out of the house Tuesday and Maria was walking in. She had just come back from making a fresh batch of cheese. So as you can see from the images I showed you, they have their own livestock, they collect eggs, Maria makes butter, cheese, milks her cows. They are virtually self-sustaining on this property. And Maria took a big hunk of cheese and she tossed it on the plate that I had with me. And I at first had objected. I said, no, I don't need this. I thought, what? But she put the cheese on my plate. And so I sat down and I bit into this cheese. It was the most incredible thing I have ever tasted. It was this kind of combination of butter and cream and some exquisite thing I can't even begin to describe. And what I realized is that Maria wanted to share the gift of this pleasure with me. So through the pyramid schemes, which I'm about to describe to you in detail, people survived with the gift, literally, of keeping each other alive. But I don't want to reduce the gift to this because it's also about pleasure. So grounding us here is to bring us into how we need to understand the pyramid schemes that crashed the Albanian economy in terms of the global military and financial power structures that founded, enabled, and profited from the pyramid schemes. What happened in Albania in 1997 is so extraordinary that the experts have difficulty explaining it. The classic International Monetary Fund explanation is that and I'm quoting directly from one of their reports, wide appeal of Albania's schemes can be attributed to several factors, including Albanians' unfamiliarity with financial markets, deficiencies in the country's formal financial system, which encouraged the development of an informal market, and within this market of the pyramid schemes and their failures of governance. Now, this is the same International Monetary Fund that in 1995 called Albania an economic success story and claimed that Albania's transition to a market economy was rapid, direct quote, and quite successful. An Albanian anthropologist at Ohio State University who specializes in economic and legal anthropology tells another story. Smoky Marasai, in her recent book, Tales from Alvarado, Ponzi Logics of Accumulation in Post-Socialist Albania, argues that the schemes were in fact a product of a common underlying set of conditions: political and economic transformations, rapid capital expansion, and unregulated informal financial practices. And that these underlying conditions were largely the outcome of devastating economic programs imposed by the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. Now, I want you to remember that in communist Albania, all housing, land, and livestock belonged to the state. There were no market-based practiced in Enver Hoxha's Albania, and they were completely unprepared for the economic shock therapy imposed upon them. Now, as is the case in all other post-communist contexts, the Sigurimi and political class, seeing the end of the regime coming, had begun making deals to sell state-owned factories and national resources to Western venture capitalists. By the time the regime changed hands, many of these deals were already signed and sealed, effectively creating the new ruling class of money and power out of the old ruling class now in bed with the venture capitalists. Now, this brought about in Albania an upward redistribution of wealth of world historic proportions. Food subsidies were slashed, hunger rose. The protest symbol of the 80s and early 90s Albania was a bundle of leeks, often the only available food, and in an upraised fist. Shock therapy imposed by the international development paradigm was so ruinous that the period of the brandished leeks would be a high watermark. It was not until the early 2000s that the GDP in Albania returned to its late 1980s levels, that is before the communist regime change. So far from the schemes that collapsed the country being an anomaly, they were the logical consequence of IMF practices. In fact, the IMF and other international organizations supported informal finance in the early 1990s. The firms, the thinking went, provided an important source of credit and liquidity in a country where state banks weren't lending and private banks didn't exist. It wasn't until 1995, after the pyramids had effectively taken over the entire country, that international economic advisors became concerned. All right, now I'm about to start getting into the details, but before I went into the details of what happened in Albania in 1997, I wanted to give you some context for understanding how it arose. Now, the major players in these schemes were also national celebrities. They were heroes in the fashion of Bernie Madoff, for example. They sponsored soccer teams and the 1996 Miss Albania pageant. They owned radio and television stations and were frequent newspaper advertisers. They openly funded political campaigns and gave kickbacks to politicians. In fact, Bebi Alimuchai, owner of VEFA, one of the largest firms involved in the bubble, called the $30 million he paid out annually in bribes an insignificant business expense. Now, in this context, a radically impoverished and traumatized population was surviving on remittances sent home from undocumented workers, largely in Greece and Italy. Remittances in the amount of $300 million annually constituted approximately 15% of the GDP. And it was this money that approximately 2/3 of the Albanian population invested in the pyramid schemes. Albanians sold their houses to invest in the schemes. Farmers sold their livestock. When the schemes collapsed in 1997, the losses were upwards of $1.2 billion, equal to half of the country's GDP. I'm so sorry, I have to interrupt to tell you that my cat is here chewing on my hand and I'm trying to distract him while I'm talking to you. So that's why you see my paper flying around. Now, before I go into the how did it happen and what does it mean for us analysis, here are the horror stories. While the Albanian Bank, the IMF, and international advisors began ringing the warning bells on the schemes, VEFA owner Alimuchai was on television giving medals of honor to the Prime Minister and the Speaker of Parliament. I'm so sorry. I have to do an intervention with the cat. Come here, boo-boo. President Sali Berisha was giving speeches about the cleanness of Albanian money. This is while the IMF had finally figured out, oh, we're going to collapse the economy. Let's stop doing this. And everybody in the country knew that the Socialist Party, the Communist Party's successor, had a direct hand in running the schemes. So people kept pouring their money in. In January 1996, the leading companies increased their interest rates from 4 to 5% a month to 6% a month, or almost 100% annually in real terms. more depositors were drawn in. Nearly 2 million people out of a country of barely 3 million invested in these schemes. This set up a competition frenzy between firms, which began to offer higher interest rates on deposits. An interest war ended up with several companies actually offering 30% interest a month on investments. By November, there were by November of 1996, there were nearly $1.2 billion in the schemes, which constituted half of the GDP of the country. When everything started crumbling, finally it came out, people are selling off. Here's what's also crazy. The biggest companies like Veta, Camberi, Silva, and Senai, they had some actual real assets. And they started lowering their interest rates, and the government supported them and saying these ones are legitimate. By January of 1997, Letecia declared bankruptcy, other schemes started folding, and then many of those who had run the largest schemes, obviously took what they had and got out of the country. Riots followed. They spread throughout the entire country. The government completely collapsed. For months, the people lived in a state of anarchy and in near civil war conditions. Now, one of the few things Albania's communist dictatorship produced, and in quantity, was Kalashnikovs, massive quantities of Kalashnikovs. The armories where the weapons were stored were looted, and many of these guns were taken by families to protect themselves during the chaos. Many more were smuggled into the former Yugoslavia. In all, almost 1 million arms and 1.5 billion rounds of ammunition disappeared from government stockpiles. By the end of June, the lek had just completely crashed. Factories closed, there was no work. Approximately 2,000 people were killed in the fallout from the pyramid schemes. All right, those are some of the highlights of what Albanians lived through. So how does this tell us about the structuring principles of a global war economy behind the pyramid schemes here? There are 3 primary ways that we see this. The first is Albania's regime changed in 1991 as war was breaking out in the former Yugoslavia. In 1992, Sarajevo was under siege, and the US forced a trade embargo against the former Yugoslavia, forced it through the UN Security Council when every other member state said this will be disastrous. Well, given that most of Albania's land border is with the former Yugoslavia, this meant that virtually every single thing they traded, unless it was to Greece or across the Adriatic, was illegal. It forced the rise of smuggling networks. And remember, this was a radically poor country. 1/3 of the population was on the verge of starvation. Albanians walked across that land border to get everything from Kleenex and bubble gum to tampons. There was nothing they could trade legally across that border. So thank you, US, and forced embargo through the UN Security Council. This also means then that the mafia was an inevitable consequence of the smuggling networks that had to be established for people to get any of the things that were available in neighboring countries. Now, the second way that we see the global war economy founding these pyramid schemes. The 2 things that Albania does have in quantity are oil and weapons. Now, with smuggling networks in place, a radically poor country and an embargo, a huge business in smuggling oil and guns across the border boomed. There are heartbreaking stories of people loading up donkeys with guns and gas and selling these to all sides and all parties during the war. This was no secret to anybody, least of all to the United States Central Intelligence Agency. Fred Abrahams tells the story of the CIA station chief in Albania in 1997, working with Albanians to get guns across the border. And it was widely known from the very beginning that some of the largest of the pyramid schemes, in particular Vafa, Letecia, and Camberi, were engaged in criminal activities, including, and this is a direct quote from an IMF report, violating United Nations sanctions by smuggling goods into the former Yugoslavia that were thought to be the source of the high returns they paid, and they had been in business for a long time, in some cases since 1992. So smuggling, money laundering, known and tacitly supported by the very actors in the international development crime. Well, I said international development crime. It should have been international development paradigm, but international development crime is a kind of an appropriate slip. So the IMF itself was quite clear. The pyramid schemes exploded in direct relation to the smuggling of weapons and oil during the period that the sanctions were imposed, 1992 to 1996, because all of that illegal money had to be laundered. It is not a coincidence that the schemes collapsed in early 1997, shortly after the sanctions were lifted. A sizable chunk of the money that had to be cleaned dried up. Again, this is directly from Chris Jarvis, the IMF go-to analyst on this. Setting the stage for the pyramid scheme mania of late 1996. First of all, at the end of 1995, United Nations sanctions against the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia were suspended, eliminating an important source of income, smuggling, for the companies. Okay, so the last crucial piece of the global war economy I'm going to touch on here is the money that needed to be laundered through the overnight privatization of the country. Now, I'm going to touch only very briefly on this, and in part because I spent the last 7 years of my life here fighting the construction mafia that's still doing what I'm about to describe to you today. But in short, you have to remember, of course, that not 1 centimeter, and I mean literally not 1 centimeter of land was privately owned. All factories and enterprises were state-owned and operated, and the overnight change from a completely planned and state-run economy to a privatized market economy fueled the illegal development craze and its construction boom that are still a primary source of money laundering today. So in this illegal construction where we launder money, I won't give you the details of that right now. We can talk about it later if you want to. But this is something that the Albanian anthropologist I mentioned to you calls the pyramid way. And she says this is not specific to Albania. So I'm going to come to more about how construction continues today and is poised to collapse the economy even worse than 1997 did. But before I get into that, I don't want us to think this is something about Albania, because this is the logic of global capital that dominates us right now. And this is why, Jen, the gift economy and everything you are helping to spearhead and champion is so important as an alternative for us. So if we think of this pyramid way, think, for example, Silicon Valley startup culture, think WeWork, or think Uber, for example, that benefits from breaking local livery regulations and offloading risk onto its drivers, who then suffer an ambiguous legal status. And the entire future profitability of the company is based on unrealizable projections of monopolizing all road transport. Okay, so remember that the pyramid schemes had been promoted by the very same people that the World Bank and IMF were celebrating as the models of economic development. Albanian politicians implementing the will of the international development community. Now, go back to the early 2000s. The current Prime Minister of Albania, Edi Rama, was at that time mayor of Albania. He earned the nickname Mr. 10% because that's how much he demanded in kickbacks for construction permits. Ilir Meta, until recently president of Albania, was described in leaked American diplomatic cables as spectacularly corrupt. His aide was extradited to the United States on murder, arson, and drug smuggling charges. And he controlled public construction tenders in the early 2000s. So where are we today? The two most powerful politicians in the country, Prime Minister Eddie Rama and former President Lear Mehta, have reached positions enabled by their control over the construction industry. And many of the same politicians who oversaw the pyramid schemes in the 1990s are key players in today's construction mafia. Now, we, the international development paradigm, the developed nations leading the global war economy, are responsible. We are responsible. We mandated the formation of smuggling networks, which became business as usual, and the mafia and oligarchs that now own and control the country and are also synonymous with government. These are our creations. This is a pain in my physical, emotional, and spiritual body of such intensity that I sometimes do not know how I can hold myself up under it. I was crushed under a similar weight in 2005, watching the United States lead the world into a war on terror. That is when I first discovered Jen and the work of the maternal gift economy at a conference in all places, Las Vegas. I came away from that conference with hope and a renewed energy to continue my work. That work brought me to Albania, and here it is the Albanians, like John and Maria, to whom I introduced you at the beginning, that helped to lift that crushing weight off of me. So I will leave you with this. What happened in Albania in 1997 is about to look like a period of plenty compared to what's coming, when the secret public-private partnerships that are the primary vehicle, partnerships, mind you, that the World Bank and IMF advised the government on, and that the Soros Foundation sent a lab out here to help to create and construct in 2013, their economic growth lab. Those are the primary vehicle driving illegal construction, and the liabilities already indentured through those outstrip the half of the GDP that sunk Albania in the pyramid scheme in 1997. It's going to get really damn ugly. But I'm not going to sink under the weight of this, because I've just come back from the Northern Albanian Alps, where Maria milks her cows and makes the most extraordinary cheese I have ever had in my life. And there is a gift alive and well. Realizing it, well, that's a long road ahead of us still. And Jen, just, I cannot tell you how much every day I draw on what you are helping to champion as the vision for the way forward. All right, I'm done. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Lori. That is such a stark, clear image of the horrific situation that's in Albania, but it's a clear and direct opening awareness for people to understand what happens in a decolonization process when people are actually reclaiming their sovereignty and these governmental systems that have been in place that are corrupt begin to crumble. And thank you for making it very clear. And while it was very difficult to hear, I appreciate so much that you left us on a good note. The maternal gift economy is the solution. And with that, we have one more area that we're going to address that's happening that Maya is familiar with in what she does. And I want to also encourage you at any point, if you have questions or comments for Lori, to please either put them in the chat or in the Q&A. So Maya Vasallo di Florio is the founder of the first modern goddess temple in Italy. She started the goddess temple of Rome and its community with the intent of creating healthier models of existence, educating participants towards new social paradigms. She provides courses of study and research based in the matricentric values of care, gift economy, peaceful communication, partnership, respect for the planet, and love of life in all its forms. She collaborates with Letecia University and gives talks and workshops about goddess spirituality and matriarchy throughout Italy and the world. Welcome, Maya.
Thank you. Thank you, Letecia, and thanks, Jen, for inviting me here today. And thanks, Lori, for the beautiful exposition of such a terrible thing. It was very clear, and it's very hard not to get emotional in this moment. So the thing that I would like to talk about today is how these pyramid schemes, how Lori said, will can affect people in everyday life. It's something terrible that I have touched just by seeing some people falling into these schemes with something that is very popular nowadays, in the last years, actually, in Italy. It started as a fashion, we could say, because it's very seductive. From Latin America. In fact, the title, the name of this phenomenon, it's now telar. The previous name was mandala. The previous name was, I don't know, because it changed so many names. And it's something from which we all should stay away from. And today, I hope with Lori's talk, with Cassie, with the things I will share, I really hope it will be clearer for each one of you listening now live, and each one of the people that will listen to this Salon after. I hope that it will be clear how to recognize this scheme in practice. This telar, I've known about it 4-5 years ago. And it's something that is very fashionable because it promises money, and it says that it's people say it's based on the gift economy. The majority of people that fall or adhere consciously to this scheme, they know Jen's gift economy, and they claim this is gift economy, but it is not. I have a video I want to show you. I'm not going to show the whole video because it's 10 minutes long and it's 10 minutes of the same bullshit. It's in Italian and I will translate it just a little bit for you. So I will put the video and I will stop every now and then to resume the sense for you all so you can understand how serious is this phenomenon and how it works with emotions. Because we human beings, believe it or not, we make decisions not with mind, but through our emotions. So if something reaches our gut, our emotions, and the wounds that we have in that particular moment, it's done. We are fucked, pardon me the word. So I would like to share with you this video, and please watch this video with a detached glance. Okay, so you can really examine what are the main things that make people, innocent people, fall into this. So, share the sound. And I will stop every now and then. Can you hear me? Okay, I will stop every now and then to resume. Just also look, please, at the images, at the language of the images that they use.
È arrivato il momento di renderli realtà.
30 anni fa, una canadese che viveva in Africa osservò in diverse comunità rurali che le donne si aiutavano molto a vicenda.
So it says it's the moment to be free. So the images are of freedom, of community, women, birds flying, very poetic. And it starts saying a Canadian woman 30 years ago, she observed how the communities of Africa worked.
Ogni settimana sostenevano una donna con denaro, vestiti e aiuto nelle faccende domestiche.
So every week they supported a woman, so it's a woman thing, and it claims to be gift economy and matriarchal scheme. So every week they supported a woman with gifts and money.
Rendendosi conto che per questo principio di cooperazione la comunità diventava più forte, più unita e più sana.
Through cooperation, this Canadian woman noticed that with these gifts, the community grew up stronger and healthier and more united.
Ispirandosi a loro, replicò questo progetto in Canada attraverso un sistema di regalo economico che permettesse di raccogliere risorse e creare una rete per la prosperità delle donne e delle loro famiglie.
So, being inspired by this model, she replicated the model in Canada, creating a net to support women through gifts, to support women and their families.
Così i circoli di solidarietà cominciarono a fiorire e la prosperità ha iniziato a propagarsi.
So the circles of solidarity started blossoming, and abundance started spreading. Marvelous. Everything is beautiful.
Un sistema di cooperazione reciproca dove le donne possono sostenersi a vicenda in modo concreto e reale.
A system of cooperation where women can support each other in a very practical and real way.
Tuttavia, questa forma di reciproca generosità non è nuova. Già nelle culture preispaniche c'era quella conosciuta come la cultura del dono.
And here it talks about how this model is very ancient. In the pre-Hispanic culture, there was the culture of gift.
Un'usanza dove, fra diverse popolazioni, si facevano regali in segno di apprezzamento.
Oggi, in America Latina, le pratiche ancestrali di solidarietà sono ancora in uso, come la mingas, in cui i vicini si aiutano a turno e quando è necessario. O la
So here it's denying what they just, what I'm gonna explain you, because here they say they give into turns and when it's necessary, which could be confused with gift economy, but it's not. So I don't want to bother you with the whole video because it's really the same concept repeated over and over and over. And it's, moreover, it's dubbed in a very bad Italian. So it's very, very difficult to also to translate for me that I'm Italian myself. So this is the video you saw. It's 10 minutes long, and it circulates on WhatsApp, basically. And every woman, like in a chain letter, is it the right word? In a chain letter, they send it to other women and other women of their, they have all the numbers they have on the phone. Why they do so? Why they feel the urge to spread this model? Because it's very seductive. Let's see how the scheme is done. Can you see? No, I have to share again. Share the screen. Okay. So the first time it happened to me, a woman that followed the teachings of the temple, and she came to me at the beginning because she wanted to take with me the training to become a priestess of Aphrodite and sacred sexuality. So she came with this, and I was talking about the training. All of a sudden, oh, have you ever heard of the telar? And I said, no, aren't you here to have a talk with me about taking the training? Yes, but I want to talk to you about the telar, so very invasive. And she started explaining me, it's gift economy. I say, oh, really? Ah, it's strange. Jen never told me about that. Yes, it's gift economy from Latin America. And the scheme is this. There are 4 winged women. Can you see where there is the blue here? Can you see where is the blue? This one are the 4 women called wind. It's written in Spanish. The winged women are those who will blow on the fire women to light the spark. So it's very beautiful because it's dressed up as something spiritual. They use the 4 elements. They use the word gift economy. They use the word sisterhood. They use the word spirituality. They meditate also during their meetings. So, and they touch the wound of fulfilling the dreams of a woman. So everything of this mandala, a sacred symbol, as you know, everything in this mandala is structured to support women and to realize their dreams. It's a gift economy, it's spirituality, and it's a way to discover the real sisterhood, because we work together to fulfill the dreams of the woman which is in the center, which is the red spot that you see, which is water. So the wind women will blow on 2 women, on 2 fire women. Every one of the fire women, they will have to give 1,000 or 2,000 euros. They will invest 2,000 euros. That's how it was said to me. If you accept to be a fire woman, you will have to spend, to donate out of the heart 2,000 euros to the water woman to fulfill her dreams. Then when she has received 2,000 euros from each one of the fire women, she will get out of the mandala. And with turns, the tierra, which means earth women, the yellow, will be in the center. Starting 2 more mandalas, of course, right? So everyone in tierra, in earth, will start 2 more mandalas, and it will multiplicate and multiplicate and multiplicate and multiplicate. And therefore, I thought, oh, how many fire women do they will need? They will need to accomplish and to realize all the desires of the women and of the woman in the center. And I said, I said to this woman, it's very strange, because don't you see that if you imagine the mandala three-dimensionally and you raise up the agua point, the water point, it's a cone, very similar to a pyramid, the geometry. So that woman in particular was in the total denial, because she, I'm not saying she was a mean woman. The majority of women are really, they adhere to this scheme out of hope. This scheme touches women and catches women for two reasons: for avidity or for necessity. The majority of women with which I have talked are in a state of necessity. Why does it have so much success? Because of the fact that it addresses the women in this case. And women compared to men are in a worse situation. In this moment, I don't know if you know, yeah, of course you know, whole of the world is facing a huge crisis, but in Italy, it's very, very, very huge and heavy to stand. So there are, in the last months, more than ever, women came to me to the temple to tell me about the telar, because every one of these wind women has the task to recruit, to call in women to be the fire women. But as I said, if you put it in 3D, it's like a pyramid. And it's a precise scheme recognizable in, for those who worked in factories or worked in the marketing. It's called Ponzi scheme. I don't know if you have ever heard about it. And I'm gonna tell you something about the Ponzi scheme. I want to show you. Ponzi scheme. It's can you see the image? This nice man here, it's Charles Ponzi. Was Charles Ponzi. He was an Italian immigrant in US, and even though the scheme was already known, he became famous for having applied it on the whole nation. He managed to get really, really, really ridiculously rich applying this fraud, because it's a fraud, to especially to Italian immigrants. He was born at the end he was born on the 1882, I think, and he lived until 1949. So this is the time lapse in which he operated this fraud. And it has his name because he asking a very, very small sum of money to each one of the people at the base of the pyramid, like $2, really not that much, but he managed to collect $15 million. And this is illegal nowadays, the Ponzi scheme. Every one of you can Google Ponzi scheme. You will see that in the majority of nations all over the world, it is declared illegal. It is a fraud. And it is the same geometry, if you see, of the mandala, but it's just disposed in a different way. if you put the people at the base of the pyramid around the people, the schemer, which you see at the top of the pyramid, it's exactly the same thing. So I have another video to make it clearer, which is also in Italian, but it's very short to make you better understand why it is destined to collapse. Right. And it is from an Italian transmission which denounces all these frauds. All right. I will translate it for you. And this is not about the telar, it's about another name that the same scheme has assumed, which is the wheel of abundance. And in this case, it catches women and men undistinctively. And it was very common in Genoa, in the north of Italy.
Eccomi qua, io mi trovo nella sede genovese del quotidiano Il Secolo XIX.
These two journalists of a newspaper in Italy, they discovered this wheel of abundance and they filmed some moments pretending they wanted to adhere to the wheel of abundance, to denounce it.
Per parlarvi di un fenomeno che ha tutto il sapore di essere una truffa.
Here you can see the collection of the collection, yes, of money, which is a fraud. Here are the secrets, and they published. You see, can you see here the first photo on top left? It's exactly the mandala scheme.
Eh sì, perché questo fenomeno sta dilagando non solo in Liguria, ma in moltissime regioni italiane.
This phenomenon is spreading widely in many regions of Italy, not only in Liguria, which is in the north of Italy.
Ed è per questo che sono in compagnia di Marco Grasso e Davide Pambianchi, rispettivamente giornalista e reporter che si stanno occupando di questo caso. Buongiorno.
These are the reporter and the journalist who cared about the case. And they're going to show us mathematically why it is impossible to receive, really, that every one of the people involved will receive the money.
Allora, di che cosa si tratta?
Ma ci sono persone che vanno in giro e propongono di mettere una quota di 10.000 euro e promettono che, coinvolgendo altre persone, il guadagno sarà di 80.000 euro.
So each one of the people, they go around and say that putting 10,000 euros, at the end they will get 80,000 euros, each one of them. So this is the promise that it's very, very seductive for people, especially for poor people.
Quindi una sorta di catena di Sant'Antonio, giusto?
Diciamo che è una riedizione della vecchia catena di Sant'Antonio che si spaccia in tempi di crisi per una società di mutuo soccorso.
So it's exactly a chain letter that in crisis time is masked from a society of mutual help.
Davide, lei è stato praticamente ospite di una di queste riunioni. Che cosa è successo?
So he was the host in one of these reunions, and that's what he heard.
Conoscono le persone, c'è un momento conviviale in cui si mangia, si ride, si rompe il ghiaccio. Poi ci mettiamo tutti in circolo, ognuno esprime il proprio desiderio.
So there is a first moment of a physical reunion in this case, while the telar, they also, during the COVID, they reunited a lot on Zoom. And one of my friends, she pretended like this journalist to be in the telar, to film and show what's really happening behind the scenes. So everything is dreamy, everything is I'm your friend, I'm your sister, everything is marvelous. They eat together and there is a very relaxed state. Everyone is friend to each other. We love each other, peace and love, very new age. And then they sit in circle and everyone shares his or her own desire or project.
Il progetto era di comprare una casa più grande.
Poi a un certo punto il tono cambia e di fatto ti vengono chiesti 10.000 euro per...
This woman that you heard talking, she expressed her dream to buy a bigger house. And then all of a sudden, the tone, the energy changes and everyone there is asked to give out of nothing 10,000 euros.
Per entrare a farne parte.
Si entra facendo un dono alla persona che sta al centro, il dono di 10.000 euro.
Assolutamente.
So the person explains, so every one of you will give a gift, they call it a gift, to the person in the center, and the gift is of 10,000 euros. It's a very big sum of money for many people, especially in this moment.
In nero questi soldi naturalmente.
Assolutamente sì, consegnati in contanti sotto forma di dono.
Si entra facendo un dono alla persona che sta al centro.
Ecco, tutti i partecipanti usano un nickname.
And everything is not traced officially, so these money are given by hand, so they are not traced by the internet. They are liquid money, and everyone in the circle has a nickname, so nobody can be identified. But let's move to the math calculations. Okay.
Come funziona questo meccanismo?
Allora, lo schema è organizzato su 4 livelli. Nel livello più esterno ci sono gli ultimi arrivati, che sono 8, e sono quelli che dovrebbero mettere tecnicamente i soldi.
So, can you see? It's exactly the mandala, the telar scheme. The scheme is organized on 4 levels, and the people on the outside level are the ones, the fuego, the fire women in the telar, who will have to give the money to the person at the center.
10.000 euro a testa. La promessa è quella di partire dal livello esterno e arrivare a essere leader. Il problema è che, come si vede da questa progressione, il numero di persone richieste diventa sempre più alto.
So the promise for everyone outside, for the last investors, is to get finally to the center and to gain 8 times what they spent at the beginning. But as you see in the mathematical progression, as you go further, the number of people that would need to be involved is enormous, and it's impossible that the scheme won't collapse.
Finché diventa chiaramente insostenibile.
Cioè, mi faccia capire, per la 17ª...
So, for the 17th time that the process is repeated, we will need 524, 5,2400. Oh my goodness, I cannot tell it in English. So this number here you see is the number of people that would need to be involved to replicate the process for only 17 times. You understand perfectly, mathematically, it's impossible. So at a certain point, what will happen is that the scheme will collapse. And the only thing that would remain to the last investors is crying. Crying. Especially to those poor women that I know, some poor women, some of them alone with children, desperate women who maybe they will take a debt to pay to enter the scheme, and they find themselves that they not only didn't receive anything, they lost the last money they had, or they asked to some friends or brothers or sisters in order to go out of misery, to go out or to fulfill their dreams, or to make their children eat better or be dressed better. And I've seen desperate women in these schemes. Now, what I would like to tell those women who are listening, maybe they are already in the telar, is please don't feel guilty. Please don't feel ashamed if you understand you were frauded. Is it the right word? You were frauded. And ask for help and go out immediately. If you are contacted by those women of the telar or people in general who invite you to join this scheme with the promise of something beautiful, so beautiful that it's so shining that you cannot see anything else around, run away immediately and denounce it, because it's illegal. The difficult thing is that we don't know from which person it started. We don't know what's behind that. So it's very difficult to collect information about that. We've been very active here in the temple community with other people of the goddess spirituality to denounce it. But it's very difficult to understand from whom it started, because they disappear like wind. And the majority of time, you don't know these persons, these people personally. The majority of time they use nicknames. So, and the majority of time, this is terrible. I've heard the registrations of these meetings myself. Sometimes they are very aggressive. And if a woman has a wound, they hook wounded women, poor women. They are very aggressive, using the mask, the glittery mask of gift economy, of matriarchy, of sisterhood, of feminism. And I've heard reunions in which the earth women, who are the ones who are going to be in the center soon after, pressed the wind women and the wind women. You have to talk more about the telar. You have to recruit more women, because this is important. This is for the evolution of we as women. We have to do it for our sisters, and blah, 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 blah. A lot of chatting, a lot of enchantment. This is like an enchantment done by words and done on the wounds that every woman, every person, but especially women have, especially in this moment of history in which we are in a terrible crisis. And there are people who lose jobs, lose houses. So really, if you are out there and you are listening to this Salon today, please be aware that it's not too late to take yourself and run away and denounce it. Because this is very difficult. They have a power on women, because it takes the heart and it takes the emotions. So I talked a lot, and I really hope this is helpful. Thank you, Jen, and thank you, Letecia, for inviting me.
Thank you, Maya. When I was preparing for this salon, I did some Googling, and these mandala, sometimes they call them looms, they're all over the world. And the articles have said that it was especially during the pandemic, when women were desperate, they have been influenced. And by design, you saw the math, by design, 88% of participants will lose their investment, will lose their gift. So it's important. The word gift doesn't necessarily mean gift when it's attached to the way that they use money, because they've attached to the exchange and an extractive orientation. So thank you, Maya, for making it very clear. And Maya, is going to probably leave before we get to the questions because she has a priestess's work is never done. So she is going to be attending to some work of the temple and her community. But Maya, thank you so much for being with us. And if you have any questions, we will make sure that Maya gets them, and we'll make sure that you have a contact information so that you can be in touch with her directly.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Take really
Bye.
good care, Maya. Thank you. Our next speaker is Cassie Thornton. Cassie really has an example of a true gift. It's not a pyramid scheme in terms of extracting. It's really a representation of something that is a solution. So Kathy Thornton is an artist, an activist who makes a safe space for the unknown, for disobedience, and for unanticipated collectivity. She uses social practice, including institutional critique, insurgents, architecture, and healing modalities like hypnosis and yoga to find soft spots in the hard surfaces of capitalistic life. Cassie has invented a grassroots alternative credit reporting service for the survivors of gentrification, has hypnotized hedge fund managers, has finger painted with grime found inside banks, has donated cursed paintings to profiteering bankers, and has taught feminist economics to yogis and vice versa. Her new book, The Hologram, which I have my own copy, The Hologram, a feminist peer-to-peer health for a post-pandemic future, is available now. Cassie, welcome. And Cassie is, where are you calling in from? You're not in the United States right now, right?
Yeah, no,
Right.
I'm in Prague, in the Czech
That's right.
Republic, in a funny occupied castle type of thing. So I can't believe the internet works. Yeah, it's so nice to be here always. And yeah, I mean, I made a presentation. I think I'm gonna first just go over what the hologram is, and then I think in the details talk a little bit about some of the moments where people have asked me about whether it was a pyramid scheme. I mean, actually, not just me. I think many people that participate in the hologram get asked this question. And then I'm going to also maybe talk just like a little bit about some of the questions when I have wondered if it was a pyramid scheme, or what are the parameters of a pyramid scheme. And it feels like the beginning of a thought process and not the end. So let's see what happens. Let's see. So the hologram, I've been thinking about it all along as an inverted pyramid scheme. And I'm going to explain more of like the mechanics of what it is and how it works and stuff, and why people might relate it to a pyramid scheme. But I think that the model that I originally could connect to, that was familiar to me, like through my family and through lots of life experience, was the only thing I could think about was like a distributed cellular structure like AA, that was like a kind of project that could be replicated with some basic information in lots of different places for lots of different people confronting some really basic needs. Obviously, AA has its issues. But I think that the hologram, as long as we live in capitalism, I think it's not a pyramid scheme. I think it's an inversion. But I've thought a lot about how maybe in a different world it would be a pyramid scheme where we weren't so worried about, where like we didn't just use money to value things, and we could not be so afraid of like the things flow, like and different things like trust flowing up and around. But I guess I'll leave those more theoretical questions to or thoughts until I'm a little bit further in describing what it is. So first of all, I just want to say that right now, I think we're in a moment where the hologram and many, many different types of projects, many people at many levels of government and of corporations are really thinking about care and the crisis of care, and we've been forced to, and it's really important. And so I guess I just wanted to say that I'm not really taking anything for granted. I don't even really know what care is anymore at this point. It's kind of everything. But with a really expanded idea of care, we're also asking, who are caregivers? And I think in Jen's notion of the gift economy, in a world where we didn't rely on exchange of money to survive, maybe everybody would be able to be a caregiver. And I guess my big question, and I think the big question of the hologram is, what would happen in a world where all caregivers were well cared for? And with a really expanded idea of who is a caregiver. So the hologram is a project that has existed now for about 7 years, but really active since the beginning of the pandemic. And it's something that many people do and many people organize now. It started as a conceptual art project. But the idea of it is really to create a network of support for regular people that they can do with their friends, and that the goal is to create support for more people through each other that can outlast the many tantrums that we do and will continue to experience as capitalism dies or morphs, and as we face all kinds of crises. It's really, the idea is to create a sort of stability for people that doesn't rely on capitalism. And the goal is not just to create health, but actually to create a possibility that through health and through stability, we can not only survive the end of capitalism, but also build new structures. I think the beginning of things is always really important. And the beginning of this project comes from a moment of crisis, which was Greece in the early 2010s, a big bankruptcy, a huge influx of migrants, and there are many, many free clinics that opened all over Greece. One of them was offering not only free care, but was really trying to challenge like hierarchies that exist in medicine. So they came up with lots of different projects that confronted hierarchy between doctor and patient, between migrant and between migrant and Greek person, between genders, all kinds of things. And so one particular project that they worked on was really, really inspiring and led to what is the hologram. And in the hologram, in the integrative model in Greece, the basic idea was that when a person came in, they were not called a patient or an invalid, they were called an incomer, to kind of shake up the idea that in order to need care, you had to be broken or sick. Everybody needs care. The incomer was seen by a therapist and a social worker and a doctor at the same time. And those people asked all kinds of questions, all in front of each other. So the therapist saw the doctor asking about the body, the doctor saw the social worker asking about working conditions, and the social worker saw the therapist asking about maybe family relations or feelings. And so this was revolutionary, not just for the incomers that experienced it, but also for the caregivers that worked on it. And one of them that I still speak to often, Froso Morelli, said that as a psychologist, having worked her whole life alone in a room with a patient, now she could see a person that was receiving her care not as a flat piece of paper, but as a hologram, because she could see all these different dimensions. So the idea of the hologram comes from this, because I was living in the United States. I was an anti-debt activist with a very precarious life. And me and a group of friends began to think about what it would mean to try to take what was happening in Greece and apply it to our lives and do it without experts. And so I'm really just going to gloss over this, but the idea of what we did was we decided, instead of having the incomer be the word for the person receiving care, that person is now called the hologram. And to kind of double up on this challenge to the hierarchy of who has power when it comes to care relationships, we wanted the hologram to actually have power, the person that's receiving care. So in this model, the hologram invites 3 people to meet with them regularly over time and to ask them questions. And just like when an incomer would go to the clinic and have 3 different types of questions asked from 3 different people, the hologram has 3 different types of questions asked, but not from experts, but from like regular people, from their friends or acquaintances or someone that they've been set up with. So those people are asking, one person is asking questions about mental and emotional health, one person is asking questions about social health, and one person is asking questions about physical health. And the idea would be that these people meet all together as a group regularly over time. So we haven't gotten to the pyramid scheme part yet. So I feel like this already is a huge challenge on multiple levels to set this up. It's like, it's both so simple as an idea, and yet there's so many obstacles to getting to this very situation. So just as a review, and as a kind of, just to deepen it slightly, the incomer of the Greek clinic is now called the hologram, and we see the hologram as an expert about their own health. No one else knows more than they do about what they've been feeling or why. And they're a teacher. And this is really important because the person that is receiving care in this situation, by asking for support and then articulating exactly what they would like and need, they make that possible for other people in a world that really does not allow anybody to be in need or to ask for what they need without feeling like they're weak or broken. So the people that are asking questions of the hologram, we call them triangle members. They are always asking questions, and they're getting better and better at asking questions. But they're never experts. They're never giving advice. And this is like one part of the viral part of the project, or the kind of like something that we hope to leak out of this project, is that we're all learning how to ask questions and how to get out of the routine of giving advice, or sort of playing with power within relationships that are dealing with vulnerability. And the people that are asking questions are not solving problems. They're not trying to fix anybody. They're just simply trying to feel as close to what the hologram is feeling as possible by asking lots of questions. And they're taking notes. And so the goal is that over time, this group might meet like every season, or for, I think with my hologram, we've been meeting almost for 3 years. So now they know me really well. They know a lot of stuff that I've gone through, and they're like my living medical record. Nobody, no doctor, no family member, no group of friends have I ever had that had seen me through so many things. And hopefully over time, that will continue. But this is where the pyramid scheme part comes in, and where people get a little bit antsy sometimes. Because in the larger picture, the goal of the project is that it moves virally. And this is why I'm really here, I think, is because we really challenge the model of exchange that most of us are used to when it comes to care. So in this model, we could look at this picture. There's a big blob in the middle. The big blob we could call the hologram, and let's just say it's me. And then there's 3 hard lines that come from the big blob to 2 to 3 little blobs. Those are my triangle. So those are 3 people, 3 friends that live in very different places around the world. And I ask those people to meet with me regularly over time and ask me questions and listen. And those 3 people don't get back what they've just given. Like, I don't turn around and say, now I'm going to do it for you, because what I do is ask them what they need in terms of support in order to continue to support me. And so this is like this really challenging thing for people, because I think in general, we're really led to believe that it not only is it not right, you feel like a burden if you can't give back immediately what you receive, and it creates a lot of like guilt and a lot of stickiness. But I think in general it's pretty amazing, because then I think like the result is that one person actually gets 3 people's attention in a way that is like, it's like clean and clear, and the focus is really there, and something actually can transform in a meeting without feelings of like what's the word? Oh, I'm totally blanking. Like a mission creep. Like, it's not like, oh, well, maybe we should talk about you. It's actually just like, it's very clear what we're going to focus on, and we have 3 people to focus on it. And so, for example, in my triangle, I have 3 people that support me, and the third person, 2 of them already have their own triangles, but now the third person has just decided that he's ready to have his. And this has happened over 3 years. So this happens very slowly. It's very gradual, because we're really building trust in relationships. And so really the goal of the project is that then everybody that's giving is receiving, and everybody that's receiving is giving, but it's not in a back and forth kind of way. It's really in a viral way. And it's not about creating a kind of closed loop of a feeling. It's really about creating a culture of care. So that it means that you can actually receive attention without feeling guilty, because you know the people around you are well supported. One thing I wanted to mention about this, though, that I've been noticing, because now a lot of people are around this project, but it takes a really long time for people to actually participate. And I think that what I'm realizing is that like the slowness is very important, but it's also it takes there's something about making something grow in a way that's actually intentional and thoughtful and not at the pace of capital that really changes things. And I was just, as I've been thinking about this, I've been thinking about how, like, what the conditions are for when people really take up the hologram and use it for themselves. And it's really not about learning it online or watching a video or taking a class, because we teach lots of workshops and lots of courses online. I think that what I've noticed is actually the only way it spreads is when somebody sees someone that they really love or respect doing it. And even if they're just sort of next door and not like a member of each other's triangles, it's actually by watching someone else do something over time that you begin to believe it's something real. And it's like, it's definitely a project that requires community. Like, I don't know if I would continue to have done it if the people around me didn't also do it. And I think that this is like a really interesting thing. And it makes me think that one of the reasons that pyramid schemes can go so wild is because people may be in a state of desperation and isolation. And when they're not talking to each other, when they're not comparing notes, I think it's different in Albania. Honestly, that's quite a different set of conditions. But maybe, but I think the social conditions that we are creating in the hologram mean that very slowly people begin to pick it up and absorb it. And so what we're doing is beginning to see like little communities sprouting where like a number of people are all using the hologram, and over years it starts to actually sort of filter out, which doesn't do a lot for some sense of trying to move at this pace of crisis, but I just don't think that it's possible. So a lot of people are really scared of this project, and a lot of people ask if it's a pyramid scheme. When I lived in rural Canada and Thunder Bay, Canada, in Ontario, I remember one of the first times I presented it to a group of students right before the pandemic. Someone told me that it was colonial and a colonial pyramid scheme. And I've thought about it ever since, like why, what are the conditions that create that fear? And I think it's so much in what Maya was talking about, that when people are tricked a lot, when they have a lot of different situations in their life where they saw something really shiny that they really wanted, and when they reached out to get it, it bit them, they start to see that pattern in everything. And so I think it's really interesting in the hologram, like the level of fear that people are confronting, even when there's not, the risk is not, it's not a material risk always in the way that other risks are material. But it's so scary. It's so scary to be vulnerable and to ask for help in a society that just doesn't have that as a pattern that you can really be exposed to. So this animation that I'm showing right now is like, it's an image of a kind of accelerated viral growth of the hologram. And I think, the idea is that it would move in this way that's like sort of, I have 3 people, they have 3 people, they have 3 people, but it's never going to work like that. It's always going to be chaotic and it changes as it goes. And I think that's what's really interesting about it. I have a lot more that I could say about it. But I think I see that we only have a half hour for questions, and I'm not sure. I think I might say one more thing and then close, although I have a lot of pyramid scheme thoughts to share. One of them is just simply when people ask me if this is a pyramid scheme, I really, really have been trying to focus on understanding where this fear comes from and why people are so led by fear rather than desire. And I think this is coming a lot from an American context, but more and more all over the world. And I just want to say that I think that we have such legitimate fears of being taken advantage of, and it's so interesting because I think in the stories that Lori and Maya shared, it's like, I'm very curious what Lori says about memory, like memory and violence, because I think in some way, like there's something that happens where like when a negative memory can really override all the positive memories, and why that is. But I think that it's so like we have such a dominant experience in the hologram of teaching courses and confronting so many fears of being shown to be wrong or of messing up socially without really like even it doesn't have money at stake. The last thing that I was gonna say, I wish I could say more, but is just that like I thought over time actually about this quite a bit, that sometimes when I'm giving presentations about the hologram as an artist, sometimes to a non-artist audience, sometimes people treat me a little bit like I'm a con artist. And it's simply because I think like my job for the last 25 years has been to live in a slightly different reality, to try to exist in a world that's not just dominated by like economic threat and environmental collapse. And that there's sometimes when it's really interesting how the word con artist is like really at the core of a Ponzi scheme or a pyramid scheme, and how like I just began to think about how like some people who might be at the base of a pyramid scheme or a con artist might actually not come in with like the worst intentions ever, but just be trying to survive in a really weird way. And I guess I just started to think about, there's so many things that I think are happening in the economy right now through different forms of networks that it's very hard to trace what is and isn't a pyramid scheme at this point. And so I think it's interesting when people kind of come to this little art project and are really, really threatened by it, because I think it hopes to be something so different. Let's see, the last thing. Yeah, I think that the important thing about the hologram is just that in order for it to really work, many people have to use it. But it's not just because there's going to be some sort of version of like, money or power flowing up, but because the real goal of the project is a little bit mystical. Whoa, there's a cat. But the real wish is to destroy capitalism and build other new forms. And so I think, it is kind of about a huge network. And so, I think that's it.
Thanks, Cassie.
Mm-hmm.
That was a very hopeful presentation. And You're right. We have about 30 minutes, but Jen, I'm wondering if you had any thoughts before we actually opened up into maybe answering some questions or having some interaction.
Well, yes, thank you all so much for these wonderful presentations. They do show what harm the exchange economy can do and what good and what another basis for living the gift economy can be. And that is actually our heritage as human beings, since we all have to be in a gift economy in our earliest years, because we are, as babies, we can't earn our living, we can't exchange anything. And so we have the model of unilateral giving that sustains us and brings us into life and makes us live right from the beginning. And in those first years, we live in a gift economy, all of us, in a maternal gift economy. And we have been doing that since prehistory because we couldn't survive without it. And now that people are studying infancy in new ways, and they're understanding how these the early experience actually programs the way we think and interact, we can see more clearly the very importance of that model, that first model. And then in capitalism, the exchange model, the quid pro quo, gets us. It comes down upon us and socializes us into the market. And so those are, we have both the gift economy already that sets down our operating system, and the exchange economy that crosses it and distorts it and makes us live in a distorted world. So of course it is scary to try to practice gift giving as Cassie's hologram is, because we have been taught, both by the market and all of its wrong values, that gifting is dangerous and makes us vulnerable, and maybe it's childish and we shouldn't be doing it because we need to survive. But instead, we have to collectively bring forward the gift paradigm and understand life in that way instead of in the exchange way. So I really appreciate all of these three presentations, because they show the pyramid scheme is a ripoff of the gift economy, and we need to be able to identify that. Whereas the hologram is an example of the gift economy, and we need to be able to identify that and find ways like the hologram to act in gift giving ways and validate that to each other and generally in society in general. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, Jen. I think it's really important. The videos that Maya showed were very marketed, you know, and I use that word specifically because it hooks you into the market, it hooks you into the money, it hooks you into something by what she was saying, your emotions, etc., etc. And Maya showed that it was to scale. What Lori was talking about in a governmental way, an international governmental level, is happening on an individual level. And Cassie's experiment, Cassie's hologram, is an antidote to that. It requires you to crack open your own thinking, and it asks you to risk appropriately. No money involved. There's no exchange of money involved.
Mm-hmm.
Lori.
Yeah, I wanted to add add just one thing to what you said. No money involved, no exchange of money involved. Cassie, this is, I mean, one of the most extraordinary things I have heard about in a very long time. I'm going to follow up on this. This is just, it's extraordinary. I'm so excited and happy to know about what you were doing and to be able to meet you this way. One of the things that comes to me, I want to just follow up on what you said about in the triangle, you're just receiving. And so having to work through that sense of, guilt, but there's also something clean about it, not sticky. It comes to me, Letecia, with what you just said, because one of the most extraordinary things that practice does is decouple time and money. So in capitalist economy production, time and money become synonymous. And time as gift and care that is an abundance delinked from money is extraordinary. I just wanted to put that part in.
Thanks, Lori. Jen, did you have something else you wanted to share?
Yeah, I wanted to say also, picking up on what you said, that these interactions happen at many different levels, from the level of the war economy to the level of the domestic economy, and to attempts to survive through what is actually cheating, which is the pyramid scheme, to projects like Cassie's hologram, which is a healing project that can bring individuals into a different relationship with each other. So there are many different levels, the individual level and the societal level, the governmental level, and the international level that these relationships are happening on. Gift on one hand and exchange on the other.
Thanks, Jen. I'm wondering, Judith, are you there? Have you seen any questions that have scanned through that you might want to?
There's a question about whether there is a cost, which has already been answered, but I think the broader question is if somebody wanted to get involved in Cassie's holograms, what do they need to do? Is there some kind of registration or some way to get started on it, or can you just say, okay, I'm going to do this and jump in?
I mean, I think anybody, in some way, anybody can do it. But I think over the last couple of years, we've developed a pretty thorough protocol for how to have a meeting, and it's happened not just through me, but lots and lots of people. So it's definitely not Cassie's hologram. It's definitely like our like all of us, our hologram. But the hologram exists as a form of a meeting, and the meeting has a protocol, and the protocol has lots of structure in it. And the structure's there, I think, for pretty good reason, to help us. I think this answers one of the other questions, to kind of help us avoid the tendency towards advice, and to make sure that the people that are doing the sort of support work also aren't invisibilizing themselves or kind of like forgetting their own feelings and needs. And so that structure, it exists in manuals, but I really think that the project is, it really travels through friends and through, it's like an oral tradition. And I don't think it's going to ever stick if you don't have somebody show you. So I think that, like, in a weird way, the kind of coolest and best thing that we have that's like been online for a long time and it's free for anybody is that we have these free facilitated sessions online. And you can just go on the website, and I'll type the right one in. It's thehologram.xyz/MVH. And so these sessions are called minimum viable holograms. and you can sign up with your 3 friends. And basically, like, we have, about 12 facilitators, and they will get online with you and they'll give a little presentation that's kind of like what I did today. And then they'll lead your group through the first meeting. And then after that, hopefully you'll know if you want to do it. And if you do want to do it, then we have like lots of we have a manual in 10 languages that can help you get through your future meetings until you're ready to, maybe you update the form of the meeting or whatever. But at least at first, when you really want to learn it, there's stuff like that to help. And then this fall, 3 amazing humans are going to teach a course that's online for 6 weeks. That's really looking at what we need to learn from the hologram in order to be better at giving care in collective spaces, and especially involving identity politics. And I think this is going to be a really, really amazing course. And so on our website, you can sign up for our newsletter, and that has that kind of stuff online. To be honest, we do so much stuff, and there's so many workshops and so many possibilities for joining us. And we're also a mess at publicizing those things. But our website is getting fixed this month. And so hopefully that stuff will be a little bit more accessible soon. I'm going to type in the exact website for if you wanted to sign up for your first session to be facilitated, though. I really think that might take a little while to do, but oh, there you go. Thank you. Thank you, Dusty. It takes a little while to get there, to have your 3 people there that you're willing to ask and to schedule with them. The other thing I'm going to share is a video that we made that's like a 4-minute video that really tries to describe the process, so that in that moment when you actually want to invite somebody to be with you for your first session, you can at least show them the video to help them understand what it is and where it's coming from and like what the feeling is like. So at least it doesn't feel totally foreign or just really hard to explain. I'm going to put that in the chat in 1 second.
Thanks, Cassie. I just wanted to link this back to the theory that Jen often talks about. You're creating this space for people to really understand what your needs are. A gift is really reflective of a response to what a true need is. And I think that is often a challenge for people. What do I really need? People are mostly, in the Western world anyways, are really stimulated to what is your desire, what is your want, not what is your need. And so having 3 people asking you questions can help clarify what the true need is. And I really appreciate that, Cassie. It's very important. And the other piece that I wanted to link it to was communication. That Jen, do you want to say a little bit about that? We just had, she reminded me about that yesterday.
Well, communication is forming the community, actually. And I always look at the word communication, and muni meant gifts in Latin. So communication would mean giving gifts together. And that's what human life is about. And our communicating, forming community, and nurturing each other in the unilateral mode of giving and receiving and passing those gifts on. So we can do that in abundance. But the market creates scarcity because a lot of those gifts get siphoned off into capital. And we need to have a way of creating abundance and being able to live and communicate in abundance. In fact, we have an abundance of language, and we give and receive word gifts to each other, satisfying each other's needs that way, and it works. So we can create community that way and create a society on earth that functions and receive the gifts of the earth, and also pass our own gifts on to the earth and to each other. So that we can actually create a society radically different from the one we're living in. And we already have the means for that in our gift-giving operating system that underlies our lives that are being parasited by the exchange economy and patriarchal ways.
Thanks, Jen. Thank you. Judith, do you see another comment or question that you'd like to share?
I'm going to give a brief comment and then a question. A couple of years ago, I saw a play in Ontario about a Ponzi scheme. It was not money. I think it was to raise chickens, although I don't remember exactly. And when it fell apart, a lot of families got destroyed because one member had persuaded another member to join. And when it fell apart, the family fell apart. It eventually went to court and there was a settlement. But the sad end to the story is that the settlement all went to unpaid income taxes. The people in the scheme never got anything back. The question, or rather it's a further comment, is that I see that there's a number of comments from Lori in the chat. And so I wonder, Lori, if you can discuss them with Cassie so that we can hear them rather than having to read them on the screen.
Yeah, and I can do it briefly. Cassie, I just really felt you talking about how much time it takes. And we, of course, we're in a time of crisis and urgency, and we'll feel that. But I also feel that that time is perhaps where one of the most crucial values exists. And Jen writes about this, the mother-child relation in those first 2 years are wiring neural networks. It takes, when we go to therapy, we need 2 years to make any basic shift. So the amount of time, 2 to 3 years, I mean, that is potentially, I mean, this is speculative, we don't have data, right? But that's potentially doing something very radical, which would be really rewiring our neural networks to create the kind of consciousness that would be the foundation necessary for a gift economy to thrive. And that's the amount of time it takes in a human. I mean, at the minimum. So I just, that actually gives me hope. So rather than seeing it as a drawback, it's where I take hope. Like that might really be doing it.
I agree. I think it's true. I mean, I think it's really changed me. I mean, I'm doing this project because it's really hard stuff for me. So it's really, I believe that it actually, it's an opportunity to deal with our habits and to create space and time for something that's not usually like valued. Like I remember before the pandemic giving lots of presentations about it, and it just all flopped because people were like, so cute, don't have time. And so nobody would try it. And so then, I mean, I begged and I kind of convinced people, instead of paying me at art institutions, that they would try it with me, and we could not get it going. So something's changed, and our habits went a little bit soft. At least those of us that are like housed, that, you know, we're at home from work during the pandemic. I think a lot of our habits really changed, or were soft. And there was, I think, this opening to kind of like try something out. And I do think that over time, shifting our habits, they're not just ours, they're social. And so when we change, other people change around us, and it's very biological, like or whatever that is. Like it's just very social, I guess. So yeah, I think it does really change a lot. I mean, I think that the big question, I think we are changing, it is good. And now the question is like, how do we use our new powers? Because I think there's a big network, there's a lot of power, there's a lot of strength. And like, what happens after you're good? I mean, if we can even be good in this world.
Yeah. Well, I think Jen, I think that's actually a good place for us in our closing words, because I'm looking at the clock and wanting to keep us on time, but it gives us an opportunity to actually have some closing words. So Jen, would you like to offer something along the lines of what Cassie was saying, or whatever else you'd like to say?
Sure. Well, let's see if I, just a minute. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I'm wondering about the idea of the necessity for physical brain alteration, let's say, in order to change the paradigm. I think that probably actually goes the other way. Changing the paradigm changes our biology, if that needs to be done, because what I believe is that we are originally a maternal species, that we are good already, and that we are being altered by the kind of paradigm we're living in and that we believe in, which is the exchange paradigm, the market, capitalism, and patriarchy, all put together on top of our good operating system, and that we need to dissolve this superstructure and get it little by little off of our belief system. We need to return to the good that we already are, everybody, men and women, and everywhere in between. And so it's a question of a paradigm shift and of understanding. We can use our minds and our understanding to step back towards who we really are, and that our understanding can question exchange. We don't have to, we can question money, we can question exchange, and we can affirm unilateral giving and receiving. And because the whole complex superstructure we're living in is all wrong in a way, and we need to be able to change it with our minds as well as our actions. We can do that because we have it already in us. Every time we breathe in and breathe out, we're receiving and giving a gift. And it's everywhere, even in language and everywhere. So we need to recognize it in order to liberate it from all of this growth that's happened on top of it. So that's.
Thanks, Jen. Lori, are there some closing words you'd like to offer?
No, I just want to echo again what you're saying, Jen. I do feel like that I just want to say this partly because I brought in the idea of rewiring neural networks, but I think of that very much, Jen, as you described, which is that we've been distorted and deformed, and we have to clean that out. And there are a lot of different ways of thinking about that and talking about that, but I do agree that this is our essence. I didn't understand that when I met you in 2005 at the first gift economy, and so I spent the rest of my career jumping up and down as a professor, activist, hammering everything that's wrong in the world, but that doesn't actually change anything. And so I guess just the last thing I would say is, Cassie, I think that other thing that I feel very deeply in what you are describing with the hologram is the principle of love as our essence, our nature, and a gift that we give. And that when love is something we give without the demand that somebody return that kind of love, whatever we've called love, which is, I think, also something that's become very distorted, then that's it. There's nothing else. As soon as we return to that, we have everything.
Thanks, Lori. Thank you. And wishing you grounded support there in the work that you're doing in Albania. Absolutely. And we miss you. So come back to our meetings when you can.
I'm returning.
Yeah. Cassie, would you like to have some closing words for us? Offer something, or are you good?
I think I'm good. Everything is, yeah. Thanks everybody. That was very lovely.
Excellent. I think that we've had a full session today, cautionary tales to the potential of solution and cracking through perhaps this moment as a hologram, each ourselves as an individual through the maternal gift economy. So I want to thank you all. Thank you, Cassie and Lori and Genevieve, Maya, who I hope will come back and listen. I see that there are still questions, but we'll make sure that if the questions were not answered here, that we'll make sure that the speakers get a copy of the comments and the chat, the questions in the question Q&A and in the chat, and perhaps they'll be able to contact you directly if you have a question for them. I'd like to thank Judith for your good attention to the feed in the chat and the Q&A and providing us with those comments and questions. Thank you so much for joining us always. Diane and Elena, thank you for your tech support. It always feels good to be held by you. Most of our viewers don't get to see your face, so if you would just pop out and smile, say hi, that would be great so that they know you're a real person. In 2 weeks, if you would want to join us, October the 1st for our Salon 36, The Gift of Water, we'll have Aria from the Sekhmet Temple, Maria Suarez and Guadalupe Urbina, who will be joining us from Costa Rica. And I just want to remind you that today's session is recorded, so you can go back and catch what you weren't able to catch in your notes. That will be at the Maternal Gift Economy Movement.org. We are very open to your questions, so please feel free to write to us at the Maternal Gift Economy at gmail.com. We're so glad to be back. We're so glad that you joined us. Until October 1st, as we move to the equinox from the light to the dark season, stay safe, be well, and be kind to one another. Thank you, everyone. Take really good care. Bye-bye.